Hello, I'm Michael Sherraden. I'm the George Warren Brown Distinguished University Professor at Washington University in St. Louis. And my Black hero today is Ida B. Wells. Ida B. Wells was committed to social justice for Black Americans after the Civil War and after emancipation, and social justice for everyone. She gathered and published evidence as a foundation for social change. In this regard, Wells was an applied social researcher and a social worker before these terms were common. Her work was highly effective. More than 100 years after she did her work, she shines as a model in using evidence for social change. Wells was born to enslaved parents in 1862, and she was orphaned at the age of 17. Despite her rough beginnings, she still found a way to get an education and become a teacher. She was never satisfied with small accomplishments. She then began to investigate lynchings of African Americans during the Jim Crow era. She said of lynchings, to quote, "Nowhere else in the civilized world do men go out and hunt, shoot down, and burn to death an individual unarmed and powerless." She went to sites of lynchings and investigated all of the circumstances, and then published the evidence in a book entitled Southern Horrors, Lynch Law in All Its Phases. In this book, she concluded that lynchings were not random acts of violence, and that common accusations of a Black man somehow threatening a white woman were mostly fabricated. Rather, she concluded that lynchings were, quote, an excuse to get rid of Negroes who were acquiring wealth and property. We should think very carefully about those words. Colonial occupation has always been about property and wealth. Wells documented this as little different in the late 19th century than it was when Europeans arrived in the Americas. Wells used her evidence on lynchings to organize local, state, national, and international opposition. She wrote very effectively, and she gave speeches all over the United States and also in Europe. Eventually, her evidence and communication skills created international pressures that shamed the United States to reduce lynchings. Thus, Ida B. Wells almost single-handedly led the challenge to reduce the horrific practice of lynchings in the United States. This was a huge contribution to social justice. Yet, unfortunately, the problem is not over. During 2020, George Floyd and other African Americans were lynched by the police on the TV news. Millions of people, disproportionately people of color, are locked in cages every day and every night. The struggle against racist violence and exploitation is never finished. Applied research and organizing to end racist violence and asset stripping are imperatives we still have today. Public policy can and should promote true democracy and asset building by the whole population. At the Center for Social Development at the Brown School, we are testing policy ideas, gathering evidence, and informing policies toward these goals, much like Ida B. Wells. We can never be as effective as Wells, but we can learn a great deal and be inspired by her extraordinary example. Thank you.